And so that experience, plus hearing the story of Howard Thurman's grandmother, I would go to different conferences and hear that story. And it's a very powerful, provocative story of, she was a slave, and um, the slave master's minister would often preach that particular text from Paul to them: slaves, obey your masters. And so she tells Howard Thurman this story that she had promised herself once freedom came. She didn't want to hear anything else from Paul. So that experience with seminary, my experience and hearing that story of Howard Thurman's grandmother, it kind of propelled me on this journey, if you will. You said investigative journey, and that's kind of what I was doing. I wanted to find out, how have African Americans interpreted Paul? Because one of the things when I kept going to these conferences, Howard Thurman's grandmother's story seemed to be put forth as the way African Americans interpreted Paul. And so I really just kind of wanted to investigate and find out, is that really true? Like, throughout history, has that been the trajectory? And so I wasn't sure what I would find. And so I was quite surprised to find that more often than not, African Americans viewed Paul really positively. They utilized his work, his writings, to protest injustice, to protest racism, to protest slavery. African American women used him to even sanction their call to preach. So it was really an exciting journey for me. I learned a lot about people that I had never heard of before doing this research. And it was an interesting experience just to see how African Americans throughout these centuries interpret Paul. I start from the 1700s, and my original intent was to work all the way to the present, but there was too much material, too many interpreters. So I had to kind of narrow it down from the 1700s, and I stopped in the mid 20th century. And even with that, there are many interpreters that I ended up, not covering, and sources that I didn't cover. But I hope that this book is kind of like an introduction, so that maybe it will spur other people to do more research in this field, because I think there's a lot of potential there. There are many more voices to be heard, many more texts to be analyzed. So I hope that it's a beginning of a conversation. I hope.
Hey, thank you so much for checking out this video clip from the Dogado podcast. To get more videos like this, simply subscribe here on YouTube. You can also download the full episode of each show on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, or your favorite podcast player. Take care.